Just after midnight, in the early morning hours of March 24th, 1989, a giant oil tanker, a 200,000-ton oil tanker, found itself in just about the worst kind of trouble that an oil tanker can possibly find itself. It had just set sail from its home port. It was on its way to its destination, and then, boom, this giant tanker hit a reef in the open water and started spewing crude oil uncontrollably all over the place. The tanker had only made it about 25 miles from where it left from, a tiny port city called Valdez, Alaska. The Exxon Valdez oil spill was, at the time, the worst oil spill in U.S. history. In all, about 11 million gallons of crude oil released into Prince William Sound. But when it came to cleaning up all that oil, something very telling happened. The president at the time, George H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush, sent the commandant of the Coast Guard up to Alaska to run the cleanup effort. And in the course of running that cleanup effort, the commandant of the Coast Guard told Exxon that he was going to need 5,000 workers to help clean up the beaches up there. Exxon said, 5,000 workers? No way. Exxon told the highest-ranking member of the United States Coast Guard, no. Now, the commandant of the Coast Guard, knowing that he had been sent up there by the White House, told Exxon that maybe they would have to take it up with the White House. Exxon said, well, that's no problem. And a short time later, after receiving a call from Exxon, the White House informed the commandant of the Coast Guard that actually, yeah, he was not getting those 5,000 cleanup workers that he had requested. Fast forward to 2001. A state-owned oil company of India wants in on a giant oil drilling project happening off the coast of Russia. India's state-owned oil company gets a sign-off from Russia, but there's a little problem. The company that's operating the project is Exxon Mobil, and Exxon Mobil is not so sure about the Indians getting in on this thing. In a meeting at the White House that year, India's prime minister tries to lobby then-President George W. Bush, Bush the Jr., to push Exxon along on this issue, saying, why don't you just tell them what to do? President Bush's response, quote, nobody tells those guys what to do. For ExxonMobil, one of the largest corporations in the whole world, pleasing a U.S. president, whether it's George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush or any other president, just has never really been necessary. Exxon, after all, is going to be around a lot longer than any U.S. president, than any Indian prime minister, than any lowly U.S. Coast Guard commandant. As the author and journalist Steve Call puts it in his new book about ExxonMobil, which is called Private Empire, quote, the time horizons for Exxon's investments stretched out longer than those of almost any government it lobbied. Quote, we see governments come and go, Exxon CEO Lee Raymond once remarked. Exxon could afford to carry themselves with this type of bravado because, as Steve Call writes, quote, in effect, Exxon was America's energy policy. Certainly there was no governmental policy of comparable coherence. Exxon has been able to maintain that sort of staying power, not just because of its multiple presidential administrations' long time horizons on its money-making plans, but also because of its single-mindedness, on its single-minded focus. I mean, the oil industry is the most profitable venture that humankind has ever known. ExxonMobil can essentially think of itself as its own country. In practical terms, it is its own country. Exxon's annual revenues are larger than the annual GDP of all these countries that you see zooming up the screen right now. Exxon has a bigger economic footprint than about 150 countries. So if you're a giant oil company like Exxon, what exactly do you spend all that money on? Well, obviously, you spend it on making yourself even more money. This week in Houston, Texas, the oil industry got together to show off its latest breakthrough technological achievements. Most of these achievements, of course, have to do with allowing oil companies to drill for oil further and faster and in riskier environments than has ever been done before. Earlier this week, engineers announced plans to drill the deepest undersea well ever drilled, ever. On Earth, 12,000 feet deep. They say it will make it possible for companies to drill into the mantle of the Earth. The big draw today in Houston was this contraption. Look, appropriately named the Claw. The Claw is an incredible technological feat that allows oil companies to recover oil platforms that have sunk. Platforms that have sunk to the bottom of the ocean after some horrible drilling accident. You send the claw down, you scoop up your damaged oil platform, and then, of course, you can see what you can salvage so you can move on to the next project. A little oil in the water, well, that's the cost of doing business. All of the big technological advancements in the incredibly wealthy oil industry right now. The thing that the oil industry appears to be spending all of its money on right now, to the extent they're spending it on anything other than themselves and joy, all of the things they are investing in are ways to drill further. Not necessarily ways to drill safer, and certainly not ways to clean that sort of thing up when it goes wrong. While the profits for that sort of drilling end up being private, while the profits may allow a single company to be, say, wealthier than 150 separate countries, the cost of pursuing those profits, well, that very often ends up being public. We are the ones who pay for that. You know, us and the otters. We pay for that, even if our own president appears to be taking orders sometimes, not from us, but from the only person more powerful than an American president, an oil company CEO.